Welcome into Chatterbox Bengals, March 6th, and it's not a happy day. Trey Hendrickson, for the second season in a row, has requested a trade from the Bengals, and this time, the Bengals obliged. Trey Hendrickson has been given permission to seek a trade this offseason. All signs pointing to the end of the edge rusher era for Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati. A great player here. 35 sacks across the last 2 seasons, led the entirety of the NFL. 17 and a half sacks each of those last 2 years. Second place in Defensive Player of the Year voting this year, a first-team All-Pro, one of the best edge rushers in football. But when Max Crosby got his deal and adjusted the market, it seems the Bengals realized they could not match. Trey Hendrickson granted permission to seek a trade just about an hour ago. Casey, officially the end of an era in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think I texted you. It's Jover.
Yeah.
It's Jover.
Yeah.
The era is done. The Ludini defense gone. Every single piece of that Super Bowl defense is now non-existent on the team, with retirements and people leaving the team to go to new teams, and now with this possible trade incoming, the old defense that we knew and loved in that Super Bowl run is gone. And I have mixed feelings about it. I think we talked about it in Off the Bench earlier today, how, if they just got things done sooner, if they were able to, get the Jamar Chase deal done last year, if they were able to, get T. Higgins figured out sooner, maybe there was a chance that they were able to get Trey done for much less money than what market value is now. With the Max Crosby deal, him being paid $35 million, it is insane to think I don't blame the Bengals for not wanting to pay Trey that, but they could have got him for 28 and a half. They could have gotten him for 29, 30, and we wouldn't have had this conversation. Now that they've let the market dictate what they have to do, now they can't afford Trey Hendrickson, and they have to go back on their word of, we want to keep these guys. We want to keep the core here. And I can't trust a word that Duke Tobin says anymore. I just can't. Can't.
I think that's the biggest takeaway for a lot of Bengals fans at this point. We heard Joe Burrow emphasize how much of a need all these guys were all offseason. Duke Tobin echoes that sentiment at the Combine, and then when push comes to shove, when something finally doesn't go their way and a market shifts away they don't want it to, they give up and give permission to seek a trade to one of those stars and let them leave the building. Letting great players leave the building, you taught me one thing, that's never a great way to do business, and it seems like the Bengals are falling back into that camp again. I think the very limited amount of goodwill that this front office and organization as a whole has built up with the fans, if there is any to begin with, I think that's gone after today. After hearing that they want to bring all these guys back, that the plan was to bring all these guys back, and then to see that plan slip through their fingers at the beginning of March. We're not even deep into the offseason yet. They let this thing get out of hand far too quickly, and that's exactly what you said right there. They gave up their control. They didn't do the job they needed to do years ago, last offseason especially, when they could have extended T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and even figured out Trey Hendrickson when he requested a trade for the first time and made this offseason a whole heck of a lot easier. And who knows how last season as a whole goes if you take a lot of those distractions out of training camp. The Browns and the Blackburns have given up a lot of the control they have over the market, over the contracts they're able to give these players by waiting until the last minute. The team we continually compare ourselves to is the Philadelphia Eagles, because the Eagles have those 2 stud wide receivers. They have some studs on defense that they're paying, and they keep adding to that roster. The craziest thing, the Bengals and Eagles both extended their quarterbacks to big money contracts in 2023. The Bengals, Joe Burrow, obviously Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. Since then, the Bengals have re-signed 1 player to a contract over $40 million. That's Logan Wilson. The Eagles, they've re-signed 8 players to contracts over $40 million, and they won a Super Bowl. You want to know how? When they get great players in their building, they don't let them out. And that's what the Bengals are doing with Trey Hendrickson. Now, I think a completely different conversation, once we realize that timeline passed and those mistakes were already made, is that the market did shift. And once it did to where Max Crosby signed at that $35 million a year mark, I don't know that the smartest thing for the Bengals to do was to extend Trey Hendrickson. He's not the same run defender as Max Crosby. He's not the same run defender as a Myles Garrett or a TJ Watt. He's a phenomenal pass rusher. And I love everything he did in Cincinnati. He deserved the Defensive Player of the Year last year. He deserved his first team All-Pro. He's one of the best in the entire game. But when you're talking about a team that's already strapped for cash, giving a 30-plus-year-old edge rusher $35 million a year when he's pretty much just a pass rusher, I don't know if that's the best way for the Bengals to go. And I know this is going to be a tough pill for Bengals fans to swallow because the defense was so bad last year, and now we're getting rid of the only bright spot. But I think in some roundabout way, the defense might end up getting better next season.
Yeah, I'm with you on the idea that there is a possibility that there's an addition by subtraction here, because you're not just getting rid of Trey Hendrickson for nothing, right? Like, we're going to get probably a high second round pick for him, maybe a couple other picks with that. And there's a possibility too that one of these teams gets so desperate, if there's a huge bidding war for him, to throw in their first. I don't know. Maybe you look at the Commanders, who are said to be interested in him. They've got pick like 29 or something like that. That's basically a second round pick. And I could see it happening. Do I think that's going to happen? No, but there's a possibility that it does. The league's leading sack guy. I mean, there's a substantial market for that sort of value, that sort of talent.
League leaders at marquee positions don't hit the market very often, and Trey Hendrickson is officially on the market, so it should garner a pretty good return.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about like where we're at now, because we already know that we're pretty upset with the front office. We're upset with Duke. The path moving forward is not just through the draft and that acquisition, that draft capital. It's, now we can dip our toes in the Milton Williams conversation. We can dip our toes in the Josh Sweat conversation, which those guys are younger. Those guys you can feel more comfortable giving long-term deals to. They're fresh coming off a Super Bowl run. I feel like a lot of people are upset, and I'm upset too. I really thought that they could get it done. They had the money to get it done before this Max Crosby deal. Now it's kind of a little more iffy if they were to do that. I really do think, though, Milton Williams, those guys, like, you can start adding more to this defensive line, more guys, because I think it's hard to explain this without just saying, like, one guy can't do it all. Trey Hendrickson, you pay him that money, you're expecting him to do it all. And that's just not how a defensive line really works. And we saw it last year. It was a guy that led the league in sacks, but the rest of the team suffered. And now you have an opportunity to maybe flesh out the team a little bit more and try to possibly replicate what you did in 2021, where you got lower, not mid-tier, but high to mid-tier guys like the Treys, like the DJ Readers of the world, like the Larry Ogunjobis, and you start filling in a group instead of one guy. You split up that $35 million amongst two guys, and you've got a solid defensive line. So it's a lot to wrap your head around in terms of that, the numbers and what it could mean for the Bengals. But I do see how this can turn into a positive very quickly. But as it stands right now today, the facts, if he does leave, this is the worst defensive line in football by far. Margin. I mean, by a wide margin.
Both rushing the passer and defending the run.
Yeah, and luckily the Bengals heavily invested into scouting the edge position at the combine. They're going to be very active in free agency if he leaves. It's just more money for them to play with. And I look forward to that aspect of things.
I think you touched on it a little bit there, the trade value for Trey Hendrickson. Obviously, that will continue to bubble up over the next couple of weeks and maybe even just days, depending on how sought after he is. But I would expect that to fall somewhere in the top 50 range, a back-end first-rounder if we get lucky, or a top half of the second-round pick. I think at just 30 years old, coming off back-to-back 17.5 sack seasons, I think he's worth that, and I think that's what he should garner. There's no reason to get out of the second round in terms of return for Trey Hendrickson. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that comes with this. And as you said there, you got to reallocate that money to some other star players. How do the Bengals fix Trey Hendrickson. I was always in the camp that letting Jesse Bates walk wasn't the worst decision in the world. The worst decisions in the world immediately followed that in how they replaced Jesse Bates. And I think we could have a similar situation here when if you let Trey Hendrickson go and you don't have a solid plan to replace production on defensive line and you keep spinning your tires on young guys that don't quite stick, that's not going to work. You have to reinvest that money into players that are proven in the NFL right now. Like you said, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, these guys that have proven it at a high level. Get them in Cincinnati, have them do their thing on the defensive line next to the guys we already have, and then invest a first-round pick in someone there too. Let's use our resources to make a weakness a strength. That's how you go from out of the playoffs to a Super Bowl contender. You have to make some weaknesses strengths in the matter of an offseason. And an argument that's always used against re-signing T. Higgins, I'm going to spin on its head and use here to defend the Cincinnati Bengals. Everyone says we saw the Bengals offense at their peak last year, leading the NFL in basically every statistic, and they still missed the playoffs. Why would you want to re-sign Jamar and T. Higgins? Well, we saw Trey Hendrickson at his peak last year, and the defense was as bad as any defense in the NFL, and the Bengals missed the playoffs. So why would we run that back? Obviously, that's an incredibly minimalistic way of thinking, and Trey Hendrickson's an incredibly impactful player that the Bengals have an uphill climb of replacing that production, but I think they're capable of doing it. I don't know why I still have faith that they're going to do the right things, but I do, and I think that it comes down to how they address this hole that determines whether or not this is the right move. I think if they sit on their hands and try to let the guys that are already here fill that production, it's going to look terrible. But if they do the right way and operate as a contender, I think this can work out for the Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, we just got to hope and pray at this moment that they have a plan now that things have gotten to this point. I think we were told what the plan was. That was a failure.
Yeah.
Do you have a backup plan? Good organizations have backups upon backups, and they have answers for their mistakes.
Right.
The Eagles do the exact same thing. They swing and miss on guys in free agency, and it doesn't matter because they had plans for backups upon backups for backups. And so I hope that the Bengals have some sort of plan here and can attack it the way that they want to now that things have gotten to this point. I know that you are going to read this, but I've got it right here in front of me.
Yeah.
The last player to lead the league in sacks and then play for a new team the following year was Jared Allen. Mm-hmm. Allen had 15 and a half sacks for the Chiefs in 2007 and then signed with the Vikings in 2008 at the age of 26. He then went on to play 9 more years and get 93 more sacks, went into the Hall of Fame. I don't think Trey Hendrickson is doing anything like that per se, but I don't think that the situations are similar. I know that I've seen that a lot go on right now in the NFL or just Twitter sphere. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that this is the exact same situation, but only time will tell. What do you think at this moment the Bengals should focus on?
I think there's only one option, and that's where I think I deviate from what you just said there. You said backups on backups on backups. If plan A was extend all 3, they should only have one backup plan and is extend the other 2. There's no other option now for the Bengals front office. They have to get T. Higgins and Jamar Chase done, and I think they have to get T. Higgins done probably by a week from tomorrow. A week from tomorrow would be 48 hours into the free agency window for the NFL. And I think by that point, it starts getting sticky when it comes to extending T. Higgins. When players are double tagged, most of the players that have long-term extensions figured out get it done before free agency. So this is when we're going to really figure out what they have done with T. Higgins, but that has to be the next thing on the docket. You realize you can't get it done with Trey Hendrickson when that Max Crosby number hits your desk. Flip the blinders, let him go seek a trade, put the blinders on, get T. Higgins and Jamar Chase done. There is no other option for Cincinnati. If they end this offseason with just Jamar Chase staying in stripes, that is going to be an embarrassment of all embarrassments. So I absolutely hope that this is them turning their focus, realizing extending Trey Hendrickson was going to be an uphill battle, and turning their focus to 2 things they think they can get done in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Hopefully that's their plan. Again, I don't know why I have optimism, but for some reason I do.
Yeah, I think now expectations should 100% be that they get both those guys done.
It has to 100%. Be, right?
It has to be. Why on earth would you not think that? Like, if they go ahead and trade Trey, that's 16 million off the books. That's just more money that goes straight into Jamar
Right.
into T. I mean, that's my expectation at this point. If they don't get T done or Jamar by the time, for my timeline, it's free agency. If they don't get
Fair
it
enough.
done before the start of free agency, they are not maximizing this year's potential.
Yeah, you're absolutely
And
right.
the same goes for the trade too. They don't get it done before the draft. I mean, what's the point?
The absolute deadline to trade Trey Hendrickson would be the start of the second round.
I mean, I guess start of the
Because
second
there's
round.
no
Is
reason you should
probably
ever
realistic.
accept anything less than this year's second round pick. Don't
Yeah,
wait till 26. He led the NFL in sacks last year. You should, at bare minimum, and I think top half of the round, I mean, if I had to say, but you should not be getting less than that. And if you wait till that round kicks off, every single pick that comes off the board is one team that you can't talk to again. So I think the deadline for that would absolutely be the start of day 2, probably. Ideally before then, so you know what you can do in round 1. Again, good franchises have plans, and they know what they're able to do. You're able to attack free agency a lot differently if you know where your money's spent.
Exactly. But I mean, my deadline for the contracts before free agency, deadline for Trey, preferably before the start of the draft. I guess day 1, the end of day 1 is fine, but at what point are you really going to get that trade done? I don't think that they'll ever make it.
I just try to give these guys
in-season.
as much time as possible before they let me down, because I know they're going to let me down. So I push those deadlines as far as I can justify, so I can hold on to hope as long as I can.
Yeah, I feel you. My final thoughts before I go, my final emotions. I'm pretty upset that this is happening. I think that everyone has a right to be upset.
Absolutely.
The organization basically let us down once again. They've been failing us time and time again over the last couple seasons, and it's frustrating. It feels like they're letting talent walk out the door. They're letting talent waste here in Cincinnati, and I think that it is an appropriate reaction to be upset. But I urge and encourage you to look at the possibilities that it opens up and presents you. Like we said, allows you to target higher free agent profiles, allows you to get that extra pick in the draft that could be a starter on this team. There's a lot of positives that you can hopefully take away from this as well.
You mentioned the Commanders, one other team linked to Trey Hendrickson so far, according to Jordan Schultz. The Falcons and the Commanders have been monitoring the Trey Hendrickson situation all summer. With his trade request now official, more teams are getting involved. So we will keep an eye on that list, and as it continues to grow, we will keep you updated with all the news you need for the Bengals offseason. One of the biggest offseasons in Bengals history. We've been saying it all year. And it just gets a little bit bumpier, but we got a long, long way to go. Every step of the way, Chatterbox Bengals will be here with you. Thanks for joining me, Casey. I appreciate it. We'll catch you all next time.